The rain hammered against the windshield as Richard Morgan drove through downtown Seattle. His wipers worked overtime but barely kept up with the downpour. Traffic moved slowly and Richard drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. He had just left a board meeting at Morgan Industries and wanted nothing more than to get home to his family. As he stopped at a red light near Fifth Avenue, something caught his eye. Through the sheets of rain, he saw a figure sitting on a bench outside Pete's diner. The diner was closed and dark, but someone sat there completely exposed to the storm. Richard squinted through the water streaming down his window. His heart stopped. It was Maya. His 17-year-old daughter sat hunched over on that bench, soaked to the bone. She wore her school uniform but no jacket. No umbrella. Nothing to protect her from the rain. In her hand she held what looked like a sandwich, eating slowly as water dripped from her hair and clothes. Richard's mind raced. Maya had told him and Claire that she was going to Sophie's house after school for a study session. She said she would be home by 8. It was only 6:30 now. Why was she here alone in the rain? Why was she lying to them? The light turned green, but Richard didn't move. Cars honked behind him. He jerked the wheel right and pulled into a parking spot half a block ahead. He grabbed his umbrella and jumped out of the car. The rain soaked his expensive suit immediately, but he didn't care. He ran back toward the bench where Maya sat. She hadn't seen him yet. As he got closer, Richard could see her more clearly. Her shoulders shook. At first he thought it was from the cold, but then he realized she was crying. Tears mixed with rain on her face. The sandwich in her hands looked old and soggy, like she had been holding it for a while. Richard's heart broke. What was happening to his little girl? He was only 10 feet away when Maya looked up. Their eyes met. The expression on her face was something Richard had never seen before. It wasn't relief or happiness at seeing her father. It was pure terror. Maya dropped the sandwich and bolted. Richard ran after her, calling her name. His umbrella flew away in the wind. Maya was fast, but Richard was desperate. She made it half a block before he caught up and grabbed her arm gently. Maya struggled against him, tears streaming down her face. "Please let me go," she sobbed. "Please, Dad, just let me go." Richard pulled her into his arms. She fought for a moment, then collapsed against him, crying so hard her whole body shook. "Baby, what's wrong?" Richard said. "Talk to me. What are you doing out here?" Maya just shook her head. She wouldn't speak. She just cried and cried while the rain poured down on both of them. Richard led her back to his car. He turned the heat on full blast and grabbed the emergency blanket from his trunk. Maya wrapped herself in it but continued to stare straight ahead, silent now. Her crying had stopped, but her face remained blank. Empty. The drive home took 20 minutes. Richard tried several times to get Maya to talk. He asked gentle questions. He asked direct questions. He even tried being stern. Nothing worked. Maya sat perfectly still, looking at nothing, saying nothing. When they pulled into the driveway of their home in the hills, the garage door opened automatically. Richard helped Maya out of the car. She moved like a robot, mechanical and distant. Claire met them at the door from the garage into the house. She took one look at Maya's wet clothes and devastated expression, and her face went white. "What happened?" Claire asked. Richard shook his head. "I don't know. I found her sitting in the rain downtown. She won't talk to me." Claire rushed forward and wrapped her arms around Maya. The girl stood stiff in her mother's embrace. After a moment, Claire stepped back and looked into Maya's eyes. "Sweetheart, please," Claire said softly. "Tell us what's wrong." "We can help you, but you have to talk to us." Maya's lips trembled. For a second, Richard thought she might speak, but then her face hardened again. She pulled away from Claire and walked toward the stairs. "I need to change," Maya said in a flat voice. It was the first thing she had said since Richard found her. She climbed the stairs slowly. Richard and Claire watched her go. They heard her bedroom door close and lock. Claire turned to Richard with tears in her eyes. "What is happening to our daughter?" she whispered. Richard had no answer. He and Claire had adopted Maya when she was 6 years old. Her biological parents had died in a terrible car accident, and she had no other family. Richard and Claire had just gotten married and weren't planning on children so soon. But when they met Maya at the adoption agency, something clicked. Those big brown eyes looked up at them with such hope and trust. They took her home that same month. The early years had been challenging. Maya had nightmares and trust issues. She struggled in school, but Richard and Claire worked with her patiently. They got her therapy. They showed her love and stability. By the time Maya turned 10, she was thriving. She made friends. She excelled in her classes. She laughed and played and seemed genuinely happy. Now at 17, Maya had grown into a beautiful and intelligent young woman. She had plans to study medicine at Stanford. She had good friends. She had everything going for her, or so Richard thought. Clearly something had gone terribly wrong. But what and when? Richard went to his study and opened his laptop. He pulled up Maya's phone records. He had access to them through their family plan. The records showed normal activity up until about 3 months ago. Then the pattern changed. Maya started making fewer calls. Her texts decreased dramatically. She stopped using social media almost entirely. 3 months ago. What happened 3 months ago? Richard opened his calendar and scrolled back. March. Nothing stood out at first. Then he saw it. A note on March 15th. Maya's school field trip to the Museum of Human History. Richard remembered that day. Maya had been excited about the trip. The museum was brand new and supposedly featured incredible technology and exhibits. She came home that evening and seemed fine. She talked about the displays and how interesting everything was. But looking back now, Richard tried to remember the days after. Had Maya started acting differently then? Had there been signs he missed? He needed more information. He needed to understand what was happening before he could help his daughter. Richard picked up his phone and started making calls. He would get to the bottom of this. He would find out what was hurting Maya. And he would fix it. That was what fathers did. They protected their children, no matter what. The next morning, Maya refused to come down for breakfast. Claire knocked on her door 3 times but got no response. Richard tried too. He could hear movement inside the room, so he knew Maya was awake. She just wouldn't answer them. Claire made pancakes, Maya's favorite. She brought a plate upstairs and left it outside the bedroom door. An hour later, the plate was still there, untouched and cold. Richard canceled his morning meetings. He wasn't going anywhere until he understood what was happening. He sat in the kitchen drinking coffee while Claire paced back and forth across the marble floor. "This isn't normal," Claire said for the 10th time. Something terrible must have happened. Should we take her to the hospital? Call the police? Richard didn't know. What would he tell the police? His daughter was sad and wouldn't talk? That wasn't a crime. There were no visible injuries. No signs of assault. Just a scared, silent girl locked in her room. Around noon, Richard heard Maya's door open. He and Claire both rushed to the bottom of the stairs. Maya came down slowly, still in her pajamas. Her eyes were red and swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept at all. "Honey," Claire said gently. "Please sit with us. Let's talk." Maya shook her head. She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled as she lifted it to her lips. Richard noticed how thin she had gotten. Had she been eating at all lately? "Maya," Richard said in his firmest dad voice, "you need to tell us what's going on." Right now, Maya set down the glass. For a moment, she looked like she might speak. Her mouth opened, then closed. She shook her head again and walked back toward the stairs. Claire moved to block her path. "No," Claire said. "You're not leaving until you talk to us. We're your parents. We love you. Whatever is wrong, we can handle it together." "You can't help me," Maya whispered. "Nobody can." She pushed past Claire and ran up the stairs. Her door slammed shut again. The lock clicked. Claire broke down crying. Richard held his wife while his own tears fell. They were losing their daughter and didn't even know why. That afternoon, Richard made more phone calls. He started with Maya's school. Her principal, Mrs. Davidson, said Maya's grades had dropped significantly over the past few months. She had been missing classes. When she did attend, teachers reported she seemed distracted and anxious. "Has anything happened at school?" Richard asked. "Any problems with other students? Bullying?" Mrs. Davidson said she wasn't aware of anything specific. She promised to ask around and call him back. Next, Richard called Sophie's mother, Helen. Helen was surprised to hear from him. "Is everything okay with Maya?" Helen asked. "Sophie has been worried sick about her." Richard explained that Maya was going through something but wouldn't tell them what. He asked if Sophie knew anything. Helen put Sophie on the phone. The girl sounded close to tears herself. "Mr. Morgan," Sophie said. "Maya has been avoiding me for months. I've tried to talk to her, but she always makes excuses. She stopped sitting with us at lunch. She doesn't answer my texts anymore. I thought maybe I did something to upset her, but she won't tell me what." Richard's heart sank further. "Sophie," he said carefully, "can you think of anything that might have triggered this? Anything unusual that happened?" There was a long pause. "Well," Sophie said slowly, "it started after that field trip. To the new museum. We all went together and had a great time. But on the bus ride home, Maya got really quiet. I asked if she was okay and she said she was just tired. But after that day, everything changed. The museum again, that same field trip from 3 months ago." "What did you see at the museum?" Richard asked. "Anything that might have upset Maya?" Sophie thought for a moment. "I mean, it was all pretty intense," she said. "Learning about space and aliens and everything. Some of the stuff was kind of scary, I guess. But we all saw the same things." Maya was the only one who reacted like this. Richard thanked Sophie and hung up. He sat in his study staring at nothing. Aliens, space, the Museum of Human History. What did it all mean? Claire came in with her own update. She had been calling Maya's other friends and their parents. Everyone said the same thing. Maya had withdrawn from all social activities. She quit the debate team. She stopped going to her book club. She even missed the spring dance she had been excited about. "It's like she's scared of something," Claire said. "But what?" Richard made a decision. "I'm going to that museum," he said. "Tomorrow morning. There's something there that affected Maya. I need to see it for myself." That night was the worst yet. Around 2 a.m, Richard heard a scream from Maya's room. He and Claire ran down the hall. Maya's door was still locked, but they could hear her crying inside. "Maya," Claire called out. "Open the door, baby, please," the crying continued. Richard was about to break down the door when they heard movement. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Maya stood there in the darkness. Her face was streaked with tears. She looked at her parents with such pain that Richard felt physically hurt. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything." Before either of them could respond, she closed the door again. The lock clicked back into place. Richard and Claire stood in the hallway feeling helpless. They were 2 successful, intelligent adults with all the resources in the world, yet they couldn't help their own daughter. Claire slid down to sit against the wall outside Maya's room. Richard sat beside her. They stayed there all night keeping watch, making sure Maya knew they weren't giving up on her. Inside the room, Maya sat on her bed staring out the window at the city lights below. She wanted so badly to tell her parents everything. But how could she? How could she explain that she had learned something so terrible, so overwhelming, that it changed everything she thought she knew about the world? How could she tell them that she wasn't safe anymore, that nobody like her was safe, that there were people, things out there who saw her not as a person but as a product, as something valuable to be taken and sold? She couldn't put that burden on them. She couldn't put them in danger too, so Maya stayed silent. She built a wall around herself made of fear and love, fear for her own safety, love for the parents who had given her everything. If staying quiet kept them safe, then quiet she would remain, even if it killed her inside. Richard arrived at the Museum of Human History just as it opened at 9 a.m. The building was massive, all glass and steel reflecting the morning sun. A huge banner hung across the entrance that read, "Discover your place among the stars," in bright blue letters. He bought a ticket from a cheerful young woman at the desk and entered the main hall. The space was enormous, with a high ceiling that made Richard feel small. Holographic displays floated in the air showing planets and galaxies. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Richard started with the first exhibit. It covered early human history from prehistoric times through ancient civilizations. Nothing unusual there. He moved through rooms showing the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and the Industrial Revolution. Standard history museum stuff. But as Richard entered the modern history section, things began to change. The exhibits became more technological. Interactive displays replaced traditional artifacts, and the information presented became increasingly strange. Richard stopped in front of a large display titled "The Truth Revealed: Humanity's First Contact." His pulse quickened as he began to read. The display explained that 50 years ago in 1975, humanity made first contact with an alien species called the Vendari. A small Vendari scout ship had crashed in the Canadian wilderness. Instead of dying, the crew survived and eventually made contact with government officials. This initial contact led to humanity learning about the Galactic Assembly, A vast coalition of intelligent species spread across thousands of star systems. Earth had been observed for centuries but left alone according to assembly laws protecting developing civilizations. The Vendari crash changed everything. Once direct contact occurred, Earth became eligible to join the assembly. But there was a problem. Human governments and assembly leaders agreed that revealing the existence of aliens too quickly would cause mass panic and social collapse. So they made a plan. A slow integration over decades. First, they would introduce the idea through science fiction, make aliens seem normal and familiar. Then they would begin soft disclosure through museums, documentaries, and educational programs. By the time full contact was announced, humanity would be ready. Richard felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. Aliens, a galactic assembly, governments hiding the truth for 50 years. But the exhibit was official. The museum had been opened by the mayor herself. Scientists and historians endorsed it. This wasn't some conspiracy theory website. This was presented as fact. Richard moved to the next display. This one showed images of different alien species. The Vendari looked almost human, but with larger eyes and grayish skin. The Kormath were massive beings covered in thick armor like plates. The Silenti were small and delicate with translucent skin. There were dozens of species shown, each with descriptions of their homeworlds and cultures. A video screen showed what appeared to be actual footage of alien ships and cities. Richard knew about computer graphics and special effects. This looked real. Too real to be fake. The next room was titled Humanity's Gift to the Galaxy. Richard walked in and found displays explaining what made humans special compared to other species. He read carefully, looking for whatever had affected Maya so deeply. According to the exhibits, humans possessed several unique traits. First was adaptability. Most alien species evolved on stable worlds with consistent environments. Humans evolved on Earth, a planet with extreme climate variations, diverse ecosystems, and constant challenges. This made humans incredibly flexible and able to thrive almost anywhere. Second was creative problem solving. Many species were smarter than humans in raw computational thinking. But humans had something different. They could see connections others missed. They could find solutions that didn't follow logical patterns. They could innovate in unexpected ways. Third was emotional resilience. Humans experienced intense emotions but could function through them. Other species were either less emotional or became incapacitated by strong feelings. Humans could be terrified and still act, could be heartbroken and still continue. This made them exceptionally difficult to break. Fourth was what the exhibit called irrational courage. Every species had individuals who could be brave, but humans routinely did things that made no logical sense. They charged into impossible situations. They sacrificed themselves for others. They refused to surrender even when defeat was certain. Other species found this behavior fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Richard felt a strange pride reading this. Humanity was special. They had something valuable to offer the galaxy. Then he entered the next room and his pride turned to horror. This exhibit was titled Human Genetic Diversity, Earth's Unique Treasure. The displays explained how humanity's isolated evolution had created incredible genetic variety. Different populations developed different traits based on their environments and challenges. The exhibit showed maps of human migration patterns. It discussed how people from different regions had different genetic strengths. It was presented as celebrating diversity, but Richard saw something else. He saw a catalog, a shopping list. One display focused on populations of African descent. It explained how evolution in intense sun and heat had created genetic advantages. Higher bone density for strength, more efficient fast-twitch muscle fibers for explosive movement, better heat tolerance and resistance to certain types of radiation. The display said these traits made individuals of African descent particularly valuable for certain roles in space, exploration and colonization. The wording was careful, scientific, but Richard felt sick reading it. Another display discussed Asian genetic populations and their advantages in high-altitude environments and efficient metabolism. Another covered European populations and cold weather adaptations. On and on it went, breaking humanity into categories based on genetics. Richard understood now. Maya had come here with her classmates. She had learned that Earth was part of a galactic community. And she had learned that in this community, different humans had different values based on their genetics. But there had to be more. This alone wouldn't cause Maya's complete breakdown. Richard kept searching. In a smaller side room, he found what he was looking for. The display was titled, Challenges in Galactic Integration Illegal Activities. It was presented as a warning and educational tool. The display explained that while the Galactic Assembly had strict laws, enforcement was difficult across such vast distances. Criminal organizations operated in frontier regions far from central authority, and one of their most profitable activities was human trafficking. Richard's hands clenched into fists as he read. According to the display, several hundred humans had gone missing over the past 5 years. Most disappeared from major cities without a trace. Investigations suggested they were being taken off-world and sold to work in mines, factories, or worse. The display noted that individuals with certain genetic profiles were particularly targeted. The criminals looked for specific traits that commanded higher prices in illegal markets. A list of targeted populations appeared on screen. People of African descent were at the top of the list, due to their physical advantages, but others were listed too. Athletes, soldiers, anyone young and healthy with desirable traits. The display ended with a hotline number to call if anyone felt threatened or was approached by suspicious individuals. It urged people to stay alert and report anything unusual. Richard stepped back from the display. He felt like he might vomit. His daughter had learned all of this. She had discovered that there was a galaxy full of aliens out there, and some of them saw her as a commodity to be stolen and sold. No wonder she was terrified. No wonder she locked herself in her room and hid from the world. Richard pulled out his phone and took pictures of everything. Every display. Every piece of information. He needed evidence. He needed to understand this completely before he could help Maya. As he left the museum, Richard's mind raced with questions. How much of this was true? Why was it being revealed now? And most importantly, how could he protect his daughter from a threat that spanned the stars? He got in his car and drove home faster than he should have. Maya needed to know that he understood now. She needed to know she wasn't alone in this anymore. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. Richard burst through the front door and called for Maya. Claire met him in the hallway with worried eyes. "She's still in her room," Claire said. "Richard, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." Richard took Claire's hand and led her to the living room. He showed her the photos on his phone. He told her everything he had seen at the museum. Claire's face went pale as she listened. "This can't be real," she whispered. "Aliens? Human trafficking to space? Richard, this sounds insane." "I know," Richard said, "but it explains everything. Maya learned all this 3 months ago. She's been living in fear ever since." They went upstairs together. Richard knocked on Maya's door. "Maya, honey," he said firmly, "I went to the museum today. I know what you saw there. I know what you learned. Please open the door. We need to talk about this." Silence. Then they heard movement. The lock clicked. The door opened. Maya stood there looking smaller than Richard had ever seen her. Her eyes were sunken. Her skin looked gray. She had lost so much weight her clothes hung loose on her frame. "You know," she said quietly. "I know," Richard confirmed. "And I need you to tell me everything. What exactly happened after that field trip? Has someone threatened you?" Maya's face crumpled. She collapsed to the floor and started sobbing. Richard and Claire rushed to her side. They helped her to the bed and sat on either side of her. Through tears and gasping breaths, Maya told them her story. After the field trip, Maya had spent days processing what she learned. The existence of aliens was shocking but exciting. The idea of humanity joining a galactic community seemed amazing. But the displays about human trafficking haunted her. She kept thinking about those missing people, about the genetic profiles being targeted. She told herself she was being paranoid. Seattle was safe. Her family was wealthy and protected. Nothing bad would happen to her. Then one afternoon, about a week after the field trip, Maya was leaving school. A man approached her in the parking lot. He was human, middle-aged, wearing a nice suit. He looked normal. Safe. The man introduced himself as Mr. Preston. He said he was a recruiter for off-world opportunities. He told Maya she had been identified as an excellent candidate for work in the outer colonies. At first, Maya thought it was some kind of school career program. But then Mr. Preston started talking about her genetic profile, about how valuable she was, about how much money her family could make if she signed a contract for just 5 years of work. Maya got scared and told him she wasn't interested. She tried to walk away, but Mr. Preston grabbed her arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop her. He told her she didn't understand how rare and valuable she was. He said opportunities like this didn't come along often. He said she should think carefully before refusing. Then he let her go and walked away. Maya ran to her car and drove home. She didn't tell anyone what happened. She thought maybe it was just a weird encounter, some crazy person with strange ideas. But 2 days later, she saw Mr. Preston again. He was sitting in a car across the street from her school, just watching. When Maya made eye contact with him, he smiled and waved. Maya started taking different routes home. She stopped going to her usual places. She became hypervigilant, always looking over her shoulder. A week after that, she saw a different person following her, a woman this time. Maya was at the mall with friends and noticed the woman watching her from across the food court. When Maya went to the bathroom, the woman followed. In the bathroom, the woman didn't threaten Maya directly. She just stood at the sinks and talked while looking in the mirror. She said Maya was making a mistake by avoiding Mr. Preston. She said the offer wouldn't stay open forever. She said it would be unfortunate if someone less professional had to make contact instead. Then the woman left. Maya had a panic attack in the bathroom stall. Her friends found her 20 minutes later. She made up an excuse about feeling sick. After that, Maya stopped going anywhere she didn't absolutely have to go. She stopped socializing. She spent lunch periods moving between different locations to avoid being predictable. She lied to her parents about where she was going so no one could track her patterns. The day Richard found her in the rain, Maya had thought she was being smart. She picked a random location far from school or home. She went during bad weather when fewer people would be out. But even there, she saw a suspicious car circling the block multiple times. When Richard appeared, Maya panicked. She thought maybe he was in danger. Maybe they were watching him too. She tried to run to lead them away from him. "I'm sorry," Maya sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I thought if I told you they might come after you and Mom too. I thought if I just avoided them long enough, they would give up and leave me alone. But they're not giving up. They're still out there, still watching." Richard held his daughter tight. His hands shook with rage. Someone had been stalking his child, threatening her, terrorizing her for months. "Why didn't the school notice?" Claire asked. "Why didn't anyone stop this man from approaching students?" Maya shook her head. "It wasn't on school property," she explained. "He was always just off campus, just far enough away that school security couldn't do anything, and he never did anything illegal. He just talked to me, just made offers." "How do you report someone for offering you a job?" Richard's mind raced. Maya was right. What could they report? A man had approached a 17-year-old and talked to her about work opportunities. Technically not a crime. Following her in public places? Hard to prove. Even harder to prosecute. "Did you call the hotline from the museum?" Richard asked. Maya nodded miserably. "I called 3 times, she said. I left messages explaining everything. No one ever called back. I think the number is fake. Or maybe they're overwhelmed with calls. Or maybe nobody cares." Richard pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police right now," he said. "This is stalking and harassment at minimum. We're filing a report." He called the local police department. An officer named Sergeant Baker took the information. He sounded bored and skeptical. When Richard mentioned the connection to the Museum of Human History and off-world trafficking, Baker's tone became even more dismissive. "Sir," Baker said, "I think your daughter may have misunderstood some things. The museum is an educational facility. If someone approached her with a job offer and she declined, that's the end of it. If she sees this person again, she should call us. But without evidence of an actual crime, there's not much we can do." Richard wanted to scream. Instead, he forced himself to stay calm. "My daughter is being stalked," he said firmly. "She is a minor who has been repeatedly approached and followed by adults. That is not okay." "Has she been physically harmed?" Baker asked. "No," Richard admitted. "Has she been explicitly threatened?" "Not in those exact words," Richard said. Baker sighed. "Look, Mr. Morgan, I understand you're worried. But teenage girls sometimes misinterpret attention. Maybe this man was genuinely offering career information. Maybe your daughter saw him around by coincidence and jumped to conclusions. Without concrete evidence, we can't arrest someone for talking to her." Richard hung up before he said something he would regret. He looked at Claire and Maya. Both stared at him with hollow eyes. They don't believe me, Maya said quietly. Nobody believes me, I believe you, Richard said fiercely. Your mother believes you, and we are going to fix this. But even as he said it, Richard felt a cold fear settling in his chest. The police wouldn't help. The museum hotline was useless. If this trafficking network really existed and really operated across planets, what chance did one family have against it? Then Richard remembered who he was. He was Richard Morgan. He built a tech empire from nothing. He had money, connections, and resources most people could only dream of. If the system wouldn't protect his daughter, he would build his own protection. He would find out who was behind this, and he would stop them, whatever it took. Richard spent the next 48 hours barely sleeping. He turned his home study into a command center. Multiple monitors covered his desk, showing security feeds, research documents, and tracking information. He used every resource at his disposal to understand the threat facing his family. First, he hired a private security firm. Within 6 hours, armed guards were posted around their property. He installed new security cameras covering every angle of the house and grounds. He upgraded their alarm system to military grade. Maya would be protected at home at least. But that was just the beginning. Richard needed to understand the scope of what they were dealing with. He started by researching the Museum of Human History. The building had opened 6 months ago with funding from multiple governments and private organizations. The board of directors included scientists, politicians, and business leaders from around the world. Everything looked legitimate on the surface, but when Richard dug deeper, he found something interesting. Several board members had connections to aerospace companies and private space ventures, companies that had suddenly received massive government contracts over the past few years. Contracts for building facilities and transport systems that seemed far beyond Earth's current technological capabilities. Richard made a list of names. He would investigate each one. Next, he looked into missing persons reports. Over the past 5 years, thousands of people had disappeared in cities across America. Most were young adults between 18 and 30. Most were healthy and athletic. The demographics matched exactly what the museum displays had described as valuable genetic profiles. What shocked Richard was that nobody seemed to be connecting these cases. Each city investigated their own missing persons individually. Nobody was looking at the pattern nationally or globally, or maybe someone was looking but keeping quiet about it. Richard created a database. He compiled every missing persons case he could find that fit the profile. The numbers were staggering. Over 3,000 people in the United States alone. Tens of thousands worldwide. Then he did something that would have been illegal if he wasn't careful. He used his company's technology to scan social media, news reports, and police databases for any mentions of recruiters approaching people about off-world opportunities. He built an algorithm to filter through millions of data points. The results came back within hours. Hundreds of reports, people posting on forums about strange job offers, parents worried about adults talking to their kids, security footage from schools and malls showing suspicious individuals. Most people dismissed it as scams or pranks. But Richard saw the pattern. The same tactics Maya described were being used everywhere, always just legal enough to avoid police intervention, always targeting specific individuals. Richard found another interesting connection. Many of the suspicious individuals could be traced back to a company called Frontier Logistics Solutions. The company claimed to handle recruitment for mining operations in Alaska and oil fields in remote locations. But Richard discovered they had no actual mining or oil operations. They were a shell company with offices in 12 countries. He was following the money trail when his phone rang. It was an unknown number. Richard almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Mr. Morgan," a woman's voice said. "My name is Linda Garcia. You don't know me, but I know what happened to your daughter. I need to meet with you. Today, alone." Richard's guard went up immediately. "Who are you?" he asked. "How did you get this number?" "I'm someone who lost my son to these people 2 years ago," Linda said. Her voice cracked. "I've been investigating them ever since. When I saw the police report you filed, I knew you would keep digging. We need to talk before you get yourself killed." Richard's blood ran cold. "Killed?" "Mr. Morgan," Linda said urgently. "You're a billionaire investigating a multi-billion-dollar criminal operation. Do you really think they'll just let you expose them? You need to be very careful. Please meet me." "I can help you," Richard thought quickly. This could be a trap. but it could also be exactly what he needed. He agreed to meet at a busy coffee shop downtown in 2 hours. He told Linda he would bring security. She said that was smart. Before leaving, Richard went to check on Maya. She was in her room with Claire, actually eating something for the first time in days. When she saw Richard, she gave him a small smile. It was the first smile he had seen from her in months. "How are you doing, baby?" Richard asked. "Better," Maya said quietly. "Knowing you believe me, knowing we're doing something about it, that helps." Richard hugged her. "We're going to fix this," he promised. "You're going to be safe again." At the coffee shop, Richard arrived with 2 security guards who he told to stay within sight but give him space. Linda Garcia was already there, sitting at a corner table. She was a small woman in her 40s with tired eyes and gray streaks in her black hair. Richard sat across from her. "Tell me about your son," he said. Linda pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. A handsome young man in a football uniform grinning at the camera. "Danny," Linda said. He was 21. Full-ride scholarship to USC. He wanted to be a doctor. 3 weeks after graduating high school, he disappeared. No note, no sign of struggle, just gone. The police investigated but found nothing. No body, no witnesses, no leads. They told Linda that young men sometimes just take off, start new lives. She should accept that Danny was gone. But Linda didn't accept it. She started investigating on her own. She found other parents with similar stories. Sons and daughters who disappeared without explanation. All of them were young, healthy, and athletic. All of them had been approached by recruiters before vanishing. Linda spent 2 years following leads and gathering evidence. She discovered Frontier Logistics Solutions and their shell companies. She found the connection to the Museum of Human History and the Soft Disclosure Program. She learned about the Galactic Assembly and the illegal trafficking networks operating in frontier space. "I've documented everything," Linda said. "I have names, locations, methods of operation, but nobody will listen. I've gone to the FBI, the media, politicians. They all think I'm crazy." A grieving mother making up conspiracy theories, she pulled out a thick folder and slid it across the table. "This is everything I have," she said. "Evidence of at least 50 documented kidnappings connected to off-world trafficking. Proof that Frontier Logistics is working with corrupt government officials to move people off Earth. Names of people who have seen the transport ships." Richard opened the folder. Inside were photos, documents, witness statements, and detailed research. It was meticulous work. The work of someone who had sacrificed everything to find the truth. "Why give this to me?" Richard asked. Linda's eyes filled with tears. "Because I can't do anything with it," she said. "I'm nobody, a single mother with no money or power. You're Richard Morgan. You have resources. You have connections. You have the ability to actually do something. And now you have a reason. Your daughter." She leaned forward. "I can't save Danny," she said. "He's been gone too long. If he's still alive, he's somewhere I can't reach. But maybe together we can save Maya. And maybe we can save all the other kids who are being targeted right now." Richard looked at the folder in his hands. He looked at Linda's desperate, hopeful face. He thought about Maya locked in her room, terrified and alone. He made a decision. "I'm in," he said. "But we're not just going to save Maya. We're going to burn this whole operation to the ground. Every person involved, every corrupt official, every recruiter. We're going to expose all of it." Linda smiled for the first time. "Then we need to build a team," she said. "I know others like me. Parents who lost children. Former law enforcement who know something is wrong. Journalists who were shut down when they tried to investigate. If you can bring the resources, I can bring the people." Over the next hour, they planned. Linda introduced Richard to her network through encrypted calls. He met Jake, a former FBI agent who was forced into early retirement when he pushed too hard on a trafficking investigation. He met Carol, a journalist who had her story killed by her editor when she tried to report on missing persons connected to off-world recruitment. He met Alex, a computer security expert whose sister disappeared 3 years ago. Each of them had pieces of the puzzle. Together they could see the full picture. By the time Richard left the coffee shop, he had a team. He had a plan, and he had hope. That night, he sat with Maya and Claire and told them everything. He showed them the folder. He explained about Linda and the others. He laid out the full scope of what they were facing. "It's real," Richard said. All of it, the trafficking, the corruption, the danger. But you're not alone in this, Maya. None of us are. There are people fighting back. And we're going to win. Maya looked at her father with something he hadn't seen in months. Not hope exactly, but not despair either. Determination. What do we do now? Maya asked. Now, Richard said, we fight back. 2 weeks later, Richard's home had transformed into the headquarters of what they were calling the Terran Protection Initiative. His large basement had been converted into a secure operations center. Computers lined the walls. Maps covered every surface. A dozen people worked around the clock coordinating efforts across the country. Linda Garcia served as operations coordinator, managing the team and organizing information. Jake used his FBI training to analyze criminal patterns and build cases. Carol worked her journalist contacts to prepare for a massive media release. Alex built secure communication systems that couldn't be intercepted or traced. Richard funded everything. He poured millions into the operation without hesitation. Security systems, equipment, legal fees, salaries for the team. He didn't care about the cost. This was about protecting his daughter and thousands of others like her. The team had grown rapidly. Parents of missing children contacted them daily. Law enforcement officers who had been stonewalled by their superiors offered help. Scientists who worked on classified projects shared information they weren't supposed to know. Even a few people who claimed to have worked for Frontier Logistics came forward as whistleblowers. The picture they built was horrifying. The trafficking operation was massive and well-organized. Frontier Logistics was just one part of a network spanning the globe. They had connections to government agencies, private corporations, and even some military units. The whole system was designed to identify, target, and acquire specific humans for sale to off-world buyers. The process usually went like this. Scouts monitored populations looking for individuals with desirable traits. They used genetic screening data from hospitals, fitness centers, athletic competitions, and even voluntary ancestry tests. When they identified a target, recruiters made contact. They offered money, opportunities, adventure. Most people said no. For those who refused, the methods escalated. Psychological pressure, veiled threats against family members, in some cases outright kidnapping. Once acquired, the victims were transported to remote locations where they waited for pickup. Small ships came at night to rural areas far from cities. The victims were loaded on board and taken to orbiting vessels. From there, they were moved to frontier colonies where laws were weak and money talked. The whole operation was protected by corruption at the highest levels. Officials were bribed. Records were altered. Anyone who got too close to the truth was threatened, discredited, or disappeared. It was a system designed to be invisible and untouchable. But Richard had something the traffickers didn't expect. He had money, determination, and the kind of resources that came from building a tech empire. And he was too angry to be scared. The team's strategy was multi-pronged. First, they needed to gather undeniable evidence. Jake coordinated surveillance operations on known recruiters. They documented interactions, followed money trails, and recorded everything. Alex hacked into Frontier Logistics servers and copied thousands of files showing operations, transactions, and client lists. Second, they needed to build legal cases. Richard hired a team of lawyers specializing in international law, human rights, and criminal prosecution. They prepared lawsuits, criminal complaints, and documentation for multiple jurisdictions. When this went public, they wanted charges ready to file immediately. Third, they needed protection for potential targets. Richard used his tech company to develop a tracking system. They created an app that at-risk individuals could install on their phones. If someone reported suspicious contact or felt threatened, the app would alert the network. Guards could be dispatched. Evidence could be gathered. Nobody would face this alone anymore. Fourth, they prepared for the media release. Carol wrote the definitive story on the trafficking operation. She compiled interviews, evidence, and documentation into a comprehensive exposé, but they couldn't release it through traditional media. Too many outlets were compromised or unwilling to publish something this controversial. So Richard bought a media company, a small independent news outlet with a strong online presence and a reputation for investigative journalism. He installed Carol as editor and gave her full editorial control. When they were ready, they would publish everything simultaneously across every platform they could access. Maya participated in the work, too. At first, Richard wanted to keep her away from it to protect her from more trauma. But Maya insisted. She said she needed to do something, needed to feel like she was fighting back instead of just being a victim. So Maya became the face of their survivor outreach program. She spoke with other young people who had been targeted. She shared her story and listened to theirs. She helped them feel less alone and more empowered. It was hard work that sometimes left her in tears, but it also helped her heal. Claire threw herself into the effort as well. She organized support groups for families of missing victims. She coordinated with therapists and counselors to provide mental health resources. She made sure that everyone involved in the operation had what they needed to keep going. The work was dangerous. Several team members reported being followed. One investigator's car was vandalized with a threatening message. Jake's apartment was broken into, though nothing was stolen. The message was clear: stop digging or face consequences. Richard increased security for everyone. He moved several key team members into safe houses. He hired former military personnel to provide protection. He made it clear that threats would not stop them. One night, Richard received a call from an unknown number. When he answered, a synthesized voice spoke. "Mr. Morgan," the voice said, "you are interfering in matters beyond your understanding. What you're doing will damage important relationships and operations. Stop now while you still can." Richard didn't hesitate. "I know what you're doing," he said firmly. "I know you're stealing people, selling them like livestock, tearing families apart, and I'm going to stop you. You can threaten me all you want. You can come after me. But I'm not backing down." The voice was silent for a moment. "You have a beautiful home, Mr. Morgan," it finally said. "A wonderful family. It would be unfortunate if something happened to them." Richard felt rage like he had never experienced before. "If you touch my family," he said in a low, dangerous voice, "if you even come near them, I will use every resource I have to hunt you down. I will spend every dollar, use every connection. I will make it my life's mission to destroy you and everyone you work with. Do you understand me?" The line went dead. Richard immediately called his security team. He had them increase patrols around the house. He moved Maya and Claire to a secure apartment he owned under a shell company name. He wouldn't take chances. But the threat had revealed something important. They were scared. The traffickers were feeling pressure. That meant the team was getting close. Over the next few days, information flooded in. Whistleblowers came forward with more details. A former government contractor provided documents showing which officials were on the trafficking network's payroll. A spacecraft mechanic who serviced transport ships gave detailed descriptions of their schedules and routes. A doctor who had been forced to examine recruits before transport provided medical records. The evidence was overwhelming. When released, it would prove beyond doubt that the trafficking was real and who was responsible. Richard called a full team meeting. Everyone gathered in the operations center. He looked at the faces around him. These people had lost so much, had sacrificed so much, had risked everything to fight for justice. "We're ready," Richard said. "We have the evidence. We have the legal cases prepared. We have protection systems in place. Tomorrow we go public with everything. The story will break simultaneously in every major city. The lawsuits will be filed in multiple courts. We'll send evidence packages to law enforcement agencies around the world. By this time tomorrow, the whole planet will know what's happening." "Are you sure?" Linda asked. "Once we do this, there's no going back. They'll come after all of us." Richard nodded. "I'm sure. This ends now. No more children stolen. No more families destroyed. No more hiding the truth. Humanity deserves to know what's being done to them. And those responsible deserve to face justice." The team agreed. They spent the night doing final preparations, checking systems, verifying information, making sure everything was perfect. Maya came downstairs and found Richard working at his computer. She hugged him from behind. "Thank you, Dad," she said quietly, "for believing me, for fighting for me, for not giving up." Richard turned and pulled his daughter into a proper hug. "I will always fight for you," he said. "Always. You're my daughter. Nothing in this world or any other world matters more than keeping you safe." Maya smiled. "Tomorrow changes everything," she said. Richard nodded. "Tomorrow we change everything." The story went live at 6 a.m. Pacific time. Carol's article appeared on their news site with the headline, "The Truth About Human Trafficking to the Stars, a Global Criminal Network Exposed." Within minutes, it spread across social media like wildfire. The article was comprehensive and devastating. It laid out the entire operation in detail, named names, showed evidence, included interviews with victims' families and whistleblowers, provided documentation of bribes, kidnappings, and corruption. Most importantly, it made the connection between the Museum of Human History's soft disclosure program and the trafficking network that had grown in its shadow. Simultaneously, lawsuits were filed in federal courts across the United States and in international courts. Criminal complaints were submitted to law enforcement agencies on 6 continents. Evidence packages containing thousands of documents were delivered to major media outlets, government offices, and human rights organizations worldwide. Richard had timed it perfectly. By releasing everything at once across multiple channels, they made it impossible to suppress. The story couldn't be buried when it was everywhere simultaneously. Within an hour, the article had 10 million views. Within 3 hours, every major news outlet was covering it. By noon, it was the only thing anyone was talking about. The reaction was explosive. Social media erupted with hashtags like Protect Our People and Justice for the Vanished. People shared stories of loved ones who had disappeared. Others reported suspicious recruitment attempts. Parents talked about warnings they had ignored that now made terrible sense. But there was another reaction Richard hadn't fully anticipated. Anger. Not just at the traffickers, but at the governments that had hidden the truth about alien contact, at the officials who had been complicit in trafficking, at a system that had valued money and secrecy over human lives. Protests erupted in major cities. Thousands of people marched on government buildings demanding answers and accountability. In Washington, protesters surrounded the Capitol. In Geneva, they surrounded the United Nations headquarters. In dozens of countries, citizens demanded their leaders explain what they knew and when they knew it. Governments tried to control the narrative, but the damage was done. Some officials denied everything, calling it conspiracy theory and misinformation. But their denials rang hollow against the mountain of evidence. Other officials tried to get ahead of the crisis by admitting to some level of knowledge while blaming others. A few brave politicians joined the calls for investigation and reform. Richard watched it unfold from his operations center. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, legal updates, and status reports. Claire stood beside him, monitoring news feeds from around the world. Maya was upstairs doing remote interviews with journalists, telling her story to millions of people. Then things started happening fast. By mid-afternoon, 3 high-ranking officials announced their resignations. The head of Frontier Logistics Solutions was arrested trying to board a private plane to South America. Police raided offices in 7 countries, seizing records and computer systems. Several recruiters were taken into custody. But there was resistance too. Some powerful people had too much invested in keeping the trafficking network operational. Richard started receiving credible death threats. His home security system detected 3 separate attempts at unauthorized entry within 24 hours. 2 members of his team were attacked, though both survived thanks to their security details. The most frightening moment came when Maya's safe apartment was discovered. Someone tried to break in through a window at 3 a.m. The security team responded within seconds, capturing 2 men before they could enter. The men refused to talk, and their lawyers had them out on bail within hours. Richard made the decision to move his family again, this time to a location he didn't share with anyone except his head of security. He also hired additional protection for every member of his team, but the attacks backfired on the traffickers. Each attempt was documented and added to the evidence. Each threat proved how desperate and dangerous they were. Public opinion turned even more strongly against them. 5 days after the initial release, something unprecedented happened. The Galactic Assembly sent an official delegation to Earth. A ship landed at the United Nations building in New York in broad daylight. For the first time, alien representatives met openly with human leaders in front of the entire world. The meeting was broadcast live. Billions of people watched as 3 alien beings entered the UN chambers. One was Vendari, one was Kormoth, and one was from a species called the Talaren that humans had never seen before. They stood before the assembly and spoke through translation devices. The Vendari representative, who introduced herself as Ambassador Kalira, spoke first. "People of Earth," she said in a voice that sounded both human and alien at once. "We come before you in shame. The Galactic Assembly has failed you. We knew of the illegal trafficking operations in frontier systems. We knew enforcement was weak. We chose to prioritize stability and gradual integration over immediate protection of your people. We were wrong. She paused, letting the words sink in. The humans taken from your world are victims of criminals operating outside assembly law, but they are also victims of our negligence. We should have acted sooner. We should have protected your people as we would protect any assembly member species. We did not. For this we apologize. The Kormath representative spoke next. His voice was deeper, rumbling like distant thunder. The Assembly Council has voted to immediately authorize military operations against all known trafficking networks. We are deploying peacekeeping forces to frontier systems. All illegal operations will be shut down. All stolen individuals will be returned to Earth if possible. Those responsible will face trial under Assembly justice. The Talaran representative, who appeared to be some kind of leader, spoke last. But words and actions alone cannot rebuild trust, she said. Humanity has been harmed, betrayed. You have every right to reject membership in the Assembly, every right to close your world to us and face the stars alone. We will respect whatever decision you make. She looked directly into the camera. However, I hope you will give us a chance to make this right. Not because we deserve it, but because the galaxy is better with humanity in it. Your courage, your determination, your refusal to accept injustice, these are qualities the Assembly needs. These are qualities we admire and fear in equal measure. The broadcast ended. The world watched and waited for their leaders to respond. Richard knew this was the critical moment. How Earth responded would determine humanity's future among the stars. Would they retreat in fear? Would they demand isolation? Or would they do something else? The answer came from an unexpected source. Maya, in an interview that was reshared millions of times, gave humanity its voice. They hurt us, Maya said to the camera. They took our people. They betrayed our trust, and that's terrible. But hiding won't bring back those who were taken. Being afraid won't make us safer. The galaxy is out there whether we like it or not. She leaned forward, her eyes fierce. So here's what I think we should do. We should go out there ourselves. Not as victims, not as merchandise, as equals. We should demand justice for what was done. We should demand protections and respect. But we should also show them what humans really are. She smiled. We're the species that doesn't quit, that doesn't surrender, that fights back when pushed. They wanted to see if we were valuable. Let's show them valuable. Let's show them that humanity doesn't just survive. We thrive, and anyone who threatens us will regret it. The interview went viral. It became the rallying cry for a movement. Within days, millions of people echoed Maya's words. Humanity wouldn't hide. Humanity would face this challenge head-on. Government leaders, sensing the public mood, took a firm stance in negotiations with the Assembly. They demanded the return of all trafficking victims. They demanded Assembly laws be rewritten to prevent future abuses. They demanded representation in Assembly leadership. They demanded Earth be treated as a full and equal member, not a junior partner. And they demanded that humanity be allowed to develop its own space capabilities. No more gradual integration, no more restrictions. Humanity would build its own ships, establish its own colonies, and defend its own people. The Assembly, faced with a unified and determined humanity, agreed to every demand. Richard watched these developments with satisfaction and exhaustion. They had done it. They had exposed the truth. They had forced change. They had protected not just Maya but all of humanity. But he knew the fight wasn't over. Getting justice for those already taken would be a long process. Building Earth's space capabilities would take years. Ensuring that trafficking never happened again would require constant vigilance. Still, they had won the most important victory. Humanity was no longer ignorant and vulnerable. They were informed, organized, and ready to fight for their place among the stars. Richard looked at Maya, who was in the next room doing another interview. His daughter, who had been so scared and alone, now spoke with confidence and strength. She had become a symbol of human resilience. He was so proud of her he could barely breathe. 6 months had passed since the truth exploded across the world. Richard stood in his home office, looking out at the Seattle skyline. So much had changed in such a short time. The city looked the same, but everything was different now. The Galactic Assembly had kept its promises. Military operations in frontier systems had shut down the major trafficking networks. Over 800 humans had been recovered and returned to Earth. Not everyone who was taken, but more than anyone had dared hope. Trials were ongoing for dozens of traffickers and corrupt officials. The assembly justice system was slow but thorough. On Earth, governments had restructured their space agencies. Instead of competing separately, nations formed the United Earth Space Coalition. Pooling resources and knowledge, they began building humanity's first true space fleet. The ships were designed by human engineers using technology shared by the assembly, but adapted to human needs and sensibilities. Construction was underway at orbital shipyards above the planet. The Museum of Human History had been shut down and reimagined. It reopened as the Museum of Truth and Justice, dedicated to documenting what had happened and ensuring it never happened again. Maya had been invited to serve on its advisory board. She accepted. Richard's work had transformed from fighting traffickers to building protection systems. The Terran Protection Initiative evolved into a permanent organization funded by multiple governments and private donors. They monitored for trafficking activity, supported victims and families, and educated the public about staying safe in a galaxy full of unknowns. Linda Garcia ran the organization now. Richard had stepped back to focus on his family and his company, but he stayed involved, serving on the board and providing resources when needed. Jake headed up the investigation division. Carol led the media and public awareness programs. Alex developed security technologies that were now standard for Earth space operations. The personal cost had been high. Richard's company lost value when he prioritized the investigation over business. Several board members resigned in protest of his choices. Some investors pulled out, but others stepped in inspired by what he had done. The company rebuilt, stronger and more purposeful than before. Claire had found her calling in supporting trauma survivors. She completed training as a counselor and now worked full-time helping people process what had been done to them or their families. She found it hard but deeply meaningful work. Maya had graduated high school with honors despite everything. She chose to defer college for a year to work with trafficking survivors and speak publicly about humanity's place in the galaxy. She traveled the world sharing her story and inspiring others. The scared girl who ate lunch in the rain was gone, replaced by a confident young woman with a mission. Today was special, though. Today was the day they got closure on one particular part of their journey. Richard, Claire, and Maya sat in a federal courtroom in downtown Seattle. The trial of Mr. Preston, the man who had first approached Maya and terrorized her for months, was concluding. Over the past weeks, they had sat through testimony and evidence. They had watched Preston's lawyers try to minimize his actions. They had heard excuses and justifications, but the evidence was overwhelming. Preston had approached over 40 teenagers in the Seattle area. 7 of those teenagers had eventually disappeared. Testimony from recovered victims confirmed Preston's role in their kidnapping and sale to off-world buyers. He faced dozens of charges under both human and assembly law. The jury had deliberated for 2 days. Now they filed back into the courtroom. Richard reached over and took Maya's hand. Claire held her other hand. Together they watched as the judge called for the verdict. On all counts, the jury foreman said, "We find the defendant guilty." Maya let out a breath she didn't know she had been holding. Around the courtroom, other families of victims cried or hugged each other. Justice had been served. The judge sentenced Preston to 40 years in prison without possibility of parole, to be served on Earth followed by transfer to an assembly detention facility for additional sentencing under galactic law. It meant Preston would spend the rest of his life locked away. As they left the courthouse, reporters swarmed them. Maya had become used to this over the past months. She stopped and faced the cameras. Today, justice was served for the victims of Mr. Preston, she said clearly. But he was just one person in a much larger system. We must remain vigilant. We must continue to protect each other. And we must never forget what happened when we were unprepared and vulnerable. A reporter called out a question. Maya, do you regret that humanity learned about alien life this way? Would you prefer we had remained ignorant? Maya considered the question carefully. I regret the pain and loss that came with the truth, she said. I regret that people were hurt and families were torn apart, but I don't regret knowing. Ignorance doesn't protect you. It just makes you easier to victimize. Now we know what's out there, and we can face it prepared. Another reporter asked about humanity's future in space. My generation will be the first to really explore the galaxy, Maya said with a smile. We'll build the colonies. We'll make first contact with new species. We'll represent Earth among the stars, and we'll do it our way, not as victims or junior partners, as equals. That evening, the Morgan family had dinner at home for the first time in weeks. Just the three of them, no security team, no meetings, no interviews. Claire made lasagna. They ate and talked and laughed. Normal family things. After dinner, Richard suggested they go out to the back deck. The night was clear and stars filled the sky. The three of them stood together looking up at the vast universe stretching overhead. "Do you think about what's out there?" Maya asked softly. "All those worlds we've never seen? All those people we've never met?" "Every day," Richard admitted. "It's overwhelming, scary, but also exciting." Claire put her arm around Maya. "A year ago you were terrified of what was out there," she said. "Now you talk about exploring it."
How did that change?
Maya thought about it. "I guess I realized that being scared doesn't make you safe," she said. "Hiding doesn't protect you. The universe is dangerous and strange and full of things I don't understand. But it's also beautiful and amazing and full of possibilities. I can spend my life afraid of what might hurt me. Or I can spend it experiencing what might inspire me." She looked at her parents. "You taught me that. When I was hiding in my room, you didn't hide with me. You fought back. You showed me that humans don't surrender to fear. We face it, we overcome it. We protect each other and keep moving forward." Richard felt tears in his eyes. "I'm so proud of you," he said. "You went through something terrible and you came out stronger. You took your pain and turned it into purpose. That's the most human thing I've ever seen." Maya smiled and leaned against her father. "So what happens now?" Claire asked. "What's next for the Morgan family?" Richard pulled both of them close. "Now we live our lives," he said. "Maya goes to college next fall. You keep helping people heal. I keep building technology to protect and connect humanity. We move forward, we grow, we thrive." He looked up at the stars again, "And maybe someday we go out there ourselves, see what the galaxy has to offer, meet species we've only read about, build something new." Maya's eyes lit up. "I'd like that," she said, "to see other worlds, to represent Earth among the aliens, to show them what humans can do when we're free to choose our own path." A shooting star streaked across the sky. All three of them watched it in silence. "Make a wish," Claire said with a smile. They closed their eyes. Each made their private wish. But Richard suspected they were all wishing for the same thing: a future where humanity could explore the stars safely, where no one had to live in fear, where Earth's children could reach their full potential among the wonders of the galaxy. When they opened their eyes, Richard spoke. "You know what I think is humanity's real superpower," he said. "Not our strength or adaptability or courage. It's this, our ability to care, to fight for each other even when it's hard, to refuse to let our people suffer when we have the power to help." He squeezed his family tighter. "The traffickers thought we were valuable because of our genetics, because of our physical traits. They were wrong. We're valuable because of our hearts, because we don't leave anyone behind. Because when one of us is threatened, all of us respond." Maya nodded. "That's what scared them in the end," she said. "Not that we were strong, but that we were united. They expected us to panic or hide or turn on each other. Instead, we came together. We protected each other. We fought back as one species with one voice." She smiled. "That's what they'll remember about humanity's first real interaction with the galaxy. Not that we were victims, but that we were fighters. And that when you threaten us, we don't break. We unite." Claire looked at her daughter with wonder. "When did you become so wise?" she asked. Maya laughed. "When I had parents who taught me that love is stronger than fear," she said. "And that family is worth fighting for." They stood together on the deck for a long time, watching the stars. Somewhere up there were alien worlds and strange civilizations, dangers and wonders beyond imagination. The galaxy was vast and humanity was small. But small didn't mean weak, and being new didn't mean being vulnerable. Humanity had announced itself to the cosmos in the most human way possible, not through grand speeches or impressive technology, but through determination.